Maker Secret Santa was an idea that came to me in about 2019. So the maker community is amazing. If you go to maker events, and I think particularly there is a small group of people who make slightly ridiculous content online, and everyone is very helpful. Some of us even have like a WhatsApp group where it's like, will I die doing this, or is it illegal? Where you can like ask all those really useful questions, because if you're making slightly crazy things, you never quite know.
Today, we're talking to Ruth Amos from Kids Invent Stuff. On her channel, she takes ideas from kids all over the world and turns them into wacky inventions. It's fun and creative and joyful. And she also does Maker Secret Santa, which is a really fun event that happens every Christmas season on YouTube. Perfect fit for the holidays. So let's dive in. You're looking very festive, Ruth.
Thanks. I wasn't sure whether we were going festive or not, but we've just finished filming some Christmas content. So the workshop's kind of half decorated. I think I've been a little bit half-hearted this year, and I've got Christmas mug, jumper, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's you've got some DIY decorations in the background. I see a dinosaur. It all seems very on brand.
Yeah, there's a lovely astronaut and a snow globe up there as well, and things like that. I have a very festive blue roll in the corner. Yeah, usually I do go. I've got like a lovely blue roll Christmas tree. Let me see if I can bring it to you. It's a festive blue roll.
Oh, blue roll. I got it. Shop towels.
Yeah, exactly. But
Nice.
yeah, usually I go a little bit all out, but yeah, I'm not sure cardboard decorations were very practical, but I do the welding on that side of the workshop, so it'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as you got a fire extinguisher, it'll be okay.
Yeah, we do. It's all good.
Did you just shoot your Maker Secret Santa?
Yeah, we
Nice.
did. Yeah, it's this is the stressful bit where things are being made and shipped and getting stuck in customs and all those joyous things. So yeah.
Yeah. I was just talking to Zyla about her Maker Secret Santa a couple weeks ago. She was really stressing about that. I know that everybody in this little cohort is working double time this time of year.
Well, I think as well, usually you're making a video and you already have enough things to worry about.
Yeah.
You're building something, you might have a sponsor. And then on top of that, you have to make sure you hit a shipping deadline. You have to make sure that you get your parcel and film it. So yeah, it's got slightly more complex than just a normal build.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute, but let's just start with so for people who don't know you, can you tell us about yourself and Kids Invent Stuff and all the cool stuff you do?
Yeah, so my name's Ruth and I am an inventor and maker. I accidentally became an inventor when I was at school. So when I was doing, I'm from the UK, and when we are 16, we do exams called GCSEs. And I did something called resistant materials, which is like design and technology, product design. And I ended up designing something called the Stair Steady, which is a specialist mobility handrail that helps people go up and down their stairs. And I got thrown into this whole world of engineering and making. Up to that point, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, which I'm very glad I wasn't. But yeah, I kind of accidentally designed this product and brought it to market, and realized that I should have always wanted to be an engineer and inventor, and started to really go on this journey of questioning why did I not see that as a career choice? Like, I was always destined to, I love making, I love problem solving. And I realized that a lot of it was around just not seeing that as an option. And so I decided to spend a lot of my time working on how, because I knew I was not the only person. I meet so many people who are like, oh, I wish I'd known this was a career. I wish I knew I could do this. And I started to become slightly obsessed with the research around why we don't have much diversity within engineering, and particularly in the UK. We have a very low percentage of women in engineering. And so I started to look at all the research and I realized that primary school age, so that's in the UK, that's like 4 to 11-year-olds, is really important. And that's where young people, particularly girls, start to form their opinions around careers. And so me and my friend Sean saw that and thought, what can we do about that? And so we decided to set up a YouTube channel where primary school children, 4 to 11-year-olds, could send us their pictures or their videos, and we'd bring them to life and kind of value that. For me, as an inventor, the first time that I saw my idea that I'd drawn on paper come to life in a factory was like a wow moment. Like, up to that point, I think I just thought that special people invented and designed things. I didn't realize that I could also, design something and have it made, or make it. And so that's what we want to kind of do with Kids Invent Stuff is, yes, we are, we bring to life popcorn firing doorbells and 7-foot dinosaurs that mop the floor and all sorts of crazy and wonderful invention ideas. But the idea is that we're showing how exciting inventing, making, designing is along the way.
A very similar background for me. I've always wanted to be an inventor. I was always sketching out ideas when I was a kid, and I had a lot of support around it though. I was homeschooled, and my parents really made sure I had like all the time I needed and resources and all that stuff. But it's a really cool thing that you're doing. I mean, I think something about it that is really unique is there's sort of an implicit understanding that that all kids have a spark of creativity that as you gel into your personality later, maybe starts to wane a little bit. We know in terms of psychology that actually happens. Like we get kind of less creative over time. But I think I'm sure you'd agree with this, that if you support that and foster creativity in kids at a young age and keep them practicing it, like they're exercising a muscle, it's something that can just, go on for the rest of their lives, regardless of what career they get into.
Yeah, I think quite often we see it as children get older with peer pressure and, the push to do exams and things like that. Creativity kind of gets pushed out of them. Over here, the school system is set up really for the Victorian era as we kind of ebb into secondary school.
Yeah.
And so it's maybe not valued as much, which is ridiculous, really, because looking at the future and looking at the jobs that we are likely to do with the rise of robotics and AI, the thing that's going to set humans apart is our creativity, our problem solving. And yet they're not the things that we start to value. We look at kind of grades and things like that. And I mean, growing up, I was obsessed with grades and things. I felt like, I wasn't doing well unless I was getting top grades. And I look back and I'm like, wow, that's scary. The things that I was very lucky. I had parents who encouraged, my creative side as well. But not all children have that, and we can't just rely on parents to kind of go above and beyond, really. But yeah, I mean, we get sent on average across the year about 10,000 kids invention ideas, and there isn't a bad one. There is always something within those ideas that you're like, yeah, whether they're 4, whether they're 8, whether they're sent in from the UK, whether they're sent in from somewhere else in the world, there is always something where you're like, yeah, I understand where this came from, or yeah, that's a great idea. But if you were to ask a load of adults for ideas, I mean, usually I get adults sending me their ideas, and some of them are not great. So there's definitely something that changes at some point. I think children are much more creative and don't have those barriers, whereas adults, a lot of the time, if you ask an adult to come up with an idea, like they come up with an app or something, and I'm like, oh, I want it to like fire things or entertain or make you laugh.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's excuse me, that's a good segue into another question. How do you identify that thing in a kid's idea that's essential to the idea, right? Like I've got a 4-year-old son, and pretty much every day he comes at me, Dad, I need you to make a candy cane that's a grappling hook and it shoots like this. And there's sort of these, I have to decipher from what he's asking for. What are you really looking for here? Like, are the colors going to be really important? If it doesn't have the stripes, the white and red stripes of a candy cane, are you going to be upset about it? Or is it more about the shape of the thing, or how are you going to play with it? All that kind of stuff. So how do you do that? How do you get these ideas and see through what the idea is to be able to make something that actually works, that the kid's going to feel like it's his or her idea.
Yeah, I also have a 4-year-old, and my 4-year-old sees weird and wonderful things emerge from the workshop in the garden. So he has a very twisted sense of what is doable and is regularly collecting parts for things he's going to build or we're going to build. So I get that. We have a few things. So when an invention's sent in, we have the picture and we have the description. We obviously have some of them sent in online. So sometimes there'll be a video with it. Other times we've gone into a school to collect the idea. So, I'm having conversations with that child. What we try and do is, if the drawing, we try and make it look exactly like the drawing. Now, sometimes the drawing, because the thing about the channel is it's not about the best drawing, it's about the idea. And if we always say, like, if you label the idea, if you label it as a big red button, it becomes a big red button. So we really encourage kind of color, labeling, a sentence, and then we have to sit and decipher that, and we have to make some kind of artistic decisions around that, and we hope that we've made it correctly. There is nothing more nerve-wracking. What we try and do is we choose what we're going to build, we build it, we film it, and then as we're about to launch the video, we get in touch with that school or that parent and let the child know. And there is nothing more nerve-wracking than waiting for that reply to be like, please tell me that child liked what we built. And we just try and do our best. So if there's colors there and we can see, we try as much as we can to make it exactly like the drawing.
Yeah. Have you ever had any bad reactions from kids? They see the thing you made and say, "Oh no, that's not what I wanted. That's not my drawing."
Thank goodness, not that anyone's told us.
Yeah, that's great. I was just watching the octopus video yesterday. The octopus wind
Wind
turbine,
turbine.
right?
Yeah, wind turbine.
That was really interesting because it's a great example of getting into real nitty gritty engineering with this stuff. Here's this fun idea. Well, it's an octopus, right? So if it's octopus tentacles, there have to be 8 of them. And then, okay, so you start doing some math, and then you realize, okay, well, that means it's going to be a little less efficient. So we have to find ways to kind of mitigate that. And, the shape of it's got to be shaped a certain way. It's got to look like a tentacle, but it also has to turn. I'm sure kids are really getting a lot out of that, just kind of seeing the process of engineering and inventing.
I mean, I don't know about kids, but I was getting a lot out of that. So quite often, Sean and I embark on building something that we don't actually know that much about. So quite often we're doing something for, the first time that we used resin on the channel is the first time that we've used resin. Do you know what I mean? Like, we were lucky with that because Sean went to university and he was a renewable energy engineer. And so that was a really interesting one because I had never built a wind turbine. And to be fair, I maybe before the start of that project didn't appreciate how cool it was, because you see them a lot, and a lot of the times the big ones hide all the stuff. And I'd never built one from scratch with a generator, and luckily we had this amazing one that the students had built for us and stuff. But when you look at something and you're like, wow, actually there is so much that goes into that. And there was a bit of which you kind of see in the video, that struggle that Sean and I go through, where I'm like, I was really pushing for like more tentacles, like, can we make it look more like the octopus? And Sean's got the practical thing. And, he had to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, so how much can we give to still make it work? Because I was like, there's no point in it just looking like a normal wind turbine. Do you know what I mean? So there are those kind of constant, going back and forwards and discussions around how, particularly with something like that, where we practically wanted it to work in a way that it has to generate electricity. So to do that, it has to function. So that was a really interesting one. And to be fair, at the end of it, I just had this newfound love for wind turbines, which at the beginning, I mean, wind turbines are cool, but I just didn't realize some of the intricacies and things like that. And having those discussions and yeah, seeing it, I think as well, you don't realize like something that you've built spin that fast as well. Like, I don't think you really see it so much in the video, but yeah, there was a moment where it was up there and it's spinning, and we're like, have we balanced it correctly? Is it working? I'm like, please don't fall down on the house. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I think along the journey, there are definitely parts of it for Sean and I that are new things that we've never done, and experiences that we're learning from as well. So I think within the videos, you see that excitement because we're just as excited to be like, this is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there you must be I mean, you've just said this basically, but like you're learning about engineering yourself as you do this, right? And does it have these projects informed other projects you're doing that aren't part of Kids Invent Stuff?
Yeah, I suppose I have a few projects that I'm doing kind of on my channels or on socials and things, and I've done demos for TV stuff and things like that. And that knowledge does, if someone calls up and say, hey, we need this making, the more you make stuff, the more knowledge you have about how that could be made. And also I think with what we're doing, we have certain restrictions. So other makers might have an idea and they think, what's going to be the best thumbnail for this? What's going to be the best? We're taking a kid's idea and we're building it, and we want that to be as authentic as possible. So that does kind of lend itself when a TV company say, hey, we want to recreate this, or how does that work? We're used to working within those parameters. But I think so often people will ask, like how do I, like, you two must know loads of things, and we don't. We're constantly getting advice, or we're Googling, or we're giving it a go. Yes, the first time when we made the fire and water shooting piano, we spoke to a gas engineer and we were like, okay, what are the possibilities of this going terribly wrong? What do we need to do? So we're taking safety advice on certain things, but also it's like we always set off not 100% knowing if it's going to work out. And that is kind of the excitement and the stress of a build. Is Sean and I are not sat there being like, we're the best makers, we can make anything. We're sat there going, we're gonna attempt this and we're gonna film this journey. And I'm sure there'll be so many bits in the video where people are like, oh, that was, I'm a hobbyist welder. Do you know what I mean? I started to learn to weld after starting Kids Invent Stuff because I thought it'd be a really useful skill. I am well aware, I do a lot of work with Lincoln Electric, and they have coded incredible welders. That is not, I'm constantly on that learning journey. And I think that's the thing with making stuff is you want to be constantly learning anyway. That's half the fun of it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, another great lesson that comes out of your channel, not just for kids, but for anybody watching this, anybody that's interested in this stuff, is that I think there's a perception when you maybe think of yourself as a potential maker, or, someone who wants to design a product or whatever it is, that you sort of need to start as an expert. I think, and maybe that comes from this kind of Victorian education based system that we have in the US, you have in the UK, where it's like, it's all about expertise and you're an expert at this now. And that gives you like the credential to go onto this thing and so on. But when you watch your channel, it's very obvious that if you're inventing something, you just don't know anything really. Like, you've got a few skills and a few things you can kind of put together to approach it, but you're always going to be looking elsewhere for expertise and for help. You're going to Google things, find an expert, find a book. Books are, I mean, I've got my wife always gets on me about this because I'm like kind of a book hoarder, but there are so many books out there, like the wind turbine book you mentioned in that last video, right? Where there's these people who just were trailblazers back in the 70s or something, when none of this stuff existed, and they painstakingly documented it for you. And there's just a wealth of knowledge in that stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of that in your channel. I think it's great.
I mean, that book is a prime example. Like, we didn't show as much as we could within that, but there are literal charts and documents about like how big different parts should be depending on like what you want out of it. And that recipe book is someone's lifetime of knowledge. And I know many people, many universities use it, many people who are wanting to build a wind turbine will use that to start. And it's like, it could be between this and this, and it's, I don't know, it's so beautifully written. But this guy has done so many calculations, so much work on kind of it becoming this thing. So when we did the octopus, so essentially there's octopus on the front of it, there's an octopus on the back of it, and the wooden octopus on the back is essentially, if it gets too windy, it catches the wind and folds the wind turbine away out of the wind. And there are dimensions for how big that should be depending on your blades and all that sort of thing. And I just sit there and think the amount of time that it would take to do that. So we build a lot of our stuff in about a week. Usually we have to build something. We have started to give ourselves more time. When we first started the channel, we had even less time and we'd work very long hours, but we're trying to get a bit better work-life balance. So we build a lot of things very quickly. And so that having that knowledge already and kind of learning from other people's mistakes and from ours as well. So, we will start about and we will be like, okay, there are different ways of making this thing. Which one are we going to do? Last time we did this worked. Do you know what I mean? So I think that it's constantly learning. And I don't think you can invent and design stuff if you're not happy to kind of learn and fail and learn from that failure.
Yeah, failure is a huge part of it. Just embracing that and realizing that the process of this is just failing over and over until it actually works out. Do you have any epic failures on projects that led to a good example of that?
I would say in every single build, something fails. There have been a few that have been very spectacular. We built like a disco coat, right? I would say probably in the first year of the channel. And we'd bought each other these horrific coats, and then we'd set the invention challenge to like design them to make them cool. And so I was making Sean a Lego jacket and Sean was making me a disco jacket. And he decided he was going to sew in all of these like sewable LEDs, but the coat was just too furry. And so he spent literally hours sewing them in, and then they didn't work. And then he had to unpick them all. And in the end, he ended up getting a soldering iron, burning holes in them and like wiring all the LEDs. And this coat is so heavy. It's incredible. And it lights up to music and all the rest of it. It was really cool. But it also, if you open it, looked like a bomb. There were lots of wires and batteries everywhere. But essentially we were like, right, we have to make this work. We live at opposite ends of the country. We have a very set window to film. And so we're like, we have to find a way to do that. Another kind of very intense example of failure is we built a Rube Goldberg machine. Now, if anyone wants to learn about failure, build a Rube Goldberg machine because they fail a lot. And we were obviously determined that we wanted it to run in a single take. And so we spent about a week in a warehouse building this thing. We had a team that helped us do it. And we had two and a half days to get it all filmed. And it took 74 attempts. So 73 times that thing failed. And we had to like reset. And we'd all like run out. And there was a part where if it got far enough, like Sean and I had to run out. We put these like onesies on. And honestly, it ran about 45 minutes before we had to get chucked out. And the weird thing about it is that it had failed those 73 times on the first section. So essentially what had happened is quite early on, like it's not good to leave stuff set. So it had like the first time it ran pretty much through, and then it had like failed on like one of the middle points. And so we'd gone back and we reset it, and we realized we'd not unset the other second part of it since that first run. And so when it actually worked and got past this point, that kept failing, along with many others, but this main, like the furthest point that kept failing, the end section ran. And we realized if that point hadn't failed on that first attempt, the whole thing probably would have run, which was crazy. Because could you imagine if it had run the first time, we'd be like, oh, Rube Goldberg machines are easy. And they're really not. But yeah, every time we had to be like reset. And when we were building it, every section, we had to make it run 11 times in a row. Everything had tape where it needed to be placed. And oh my word. Yeah, definitely trauma after building a Rube Goldberg machine. Yeah, we combined 60 kids' invention ideas. So it was quite a big one.
Let's talk about dream projects. Are there any dream projects you've got in mind? Like some submission that is kind of sitting on a shelf somewhere, and if you had the resources and the time, you would really like to do it?
I suppose there's a few. We like the idea. We always get a lot of flying inventions, and obviously because of like Richard Browning and gravity, like I'm aware that there are jet suits, people, or creators have already made jet suits and things, but I like the idea of doing something maybe with one of the inventions that already flies and does other things. So, adding stuff onto that. but I hear they're very precious about their jet suits. They're very expensive. So I think, again, that would, and anything that has to, quite often most things are tested by Sean and I have a feeling if you're also flying and, like, I don't know, firing out jelly beans or something, there's probably some serious risk assessments that need to be done on that. We've always wanted to do some sort of like musical band or something, like some big live event where you've got different, we've built a few instruments, but we like the idea of building like a full-on like band with invention musical instruments. I'm trying to think what else. We've been really lucky in that a lot of the big things that we wanted to build, the Rube Goldberg machine, we've done that. We wanted to do an engineering inventing musical. We've done that. So yeah, a lot of the stuff kind of there's a few where I think, oh, they're not necessarily budget things. They're sometimes more of a skill thing. So I'm like, we would need someone that has skills. So there's quite a few inventions that involve like building things, then people jump from high places and stuff like that. And I'm just really aware that those things need to be done correctly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that the band one is one that we talk a lot about. We would love to do like a big live invention build as well. So, imagine turning up to BET and across the space of BET, we're bringing to life live like a load of kids' invention ideas. So yeah, there's a few things, but again, building stuff live involves quite a bit of prep, and there's somewhere I'm like, there's probably enough, and then there's others where you're like, yeah, that's a crazy budget to make that work and do it well.
Your process on Kids Invent stuff is very hands-on. It's like it's quick and dirty. You're doing prototypes. You're making stuff really quickly. You've got a hand drill and a skill saw and baling wire and duct tape, right? But you also get into the stuff we're interested in at Autodesk, which is software, our software, right? So how does CAD CAM software, how does it fit into your process on Kids Invent stuff?
Yeah, so sometimes in fact, I don't know if you can see, so where my finger is there is a red thing there, and it's got a little unicorn, but the red thing is the important thing there. So I think it might have been one of the first things that we ever drew and then 3D printed in Fusion 360 was that, and that is the end of a snow cannon. So we essentially turned a leaf blower into something that would make snow, and to do that we used that 3D printed part and a sock. And sometimes there are just things that when you're making it, there isn't something that's suitable, or there's something that someone's already done. So there'll be parts where you're like, actually, we really need this, or we need this thing that's going to interact with this. And you can go on and you're like, oh, someone's already drawn that. That's great. We should 3D print that. Obviously, we do a lot of work with primary schools, and we're really keen to get them thinking about using CAD software and things as well. And I think a lot of teachers maybe aren't aware that it's quite simple to use things like Tinkercad in the classroom and things like that. So, whenever we're showing videos and we're talking about stuff, we're always also talking about kind of Tinkercad. And I think the fact that you can draw things in Tinkercad and then open them in Fusion 360 is really great, because it allows, we're talking about primary school children, with 5-6-year-olds. And so them being able to understand kind of 3D CAD and really kind of bring that forwards is really important. So usually if we're looking at using something that's 3D printed or has that sort of element to it, we realize that there isn't, we always have this, I always vividly remember this kind of sums up our channel. So Colin Furs is a good friend of ours, and I would say the way that we make and the way that Colin makes are completely different ends of the spectrum. And I always remember he was watching our waterfall swing, and he was like, there's a part where you connected the leaf blower to the scaffolding pole, and I was like, wow, that's a really interesting shape. What are they going to do? Are they going to CAD it up? Are they going to like 3D print something? And he was like, oh no, they're going to cable tie and gaffer tape it. So quite often, because of like timing and stuff like that, we don't always finesse things, but then there are certain points where it needs to be. So the snow, the thing that we 3D printed for the snow cone, there was like 3 or 4 different iterations of that. And then we also did a saxophone that fires out eco glitter, and we wanted it to be a very obvious, like still be a saxophone and not have loads of stuff on it. So there were bits on that. We 3D printed a new outlet for it and things like that. And we CAD'd that up in Fusion, and then we 3D printed that in actually like a bronze sort of thing. So you could 3D print it and then polish it up, and it looked very similar to the saxophone and things like that. So, you know, if there's pieces that we need to have certain properties where 3D printing's good or they're particularly awkward, but there are probably points where we could do more, but the time of it is like, okay, we don't have the time to necessarily finesse that. But I think as well, there's some really nice kind of, not necessarily like easy wins, but there's some really nice finishing touches that you can do when you're able to draw something up and 3D print it, whether that's, you know, in the past we've 3D printed our logo to put onto things, or, you know, a stencil for something. There's just loads of different ways that can be used. And personally, outside of Kids Invent Stuff, I use the 3D printer a lot, and kind of drawing stuff up and modifying things. And yeah, I think, you know, you've got a 4-year-old, I've got a 4-year-old. When they're asking for things to be made, the kind of, sometimes the simplest way is to draw something or download something and set it off printing when they're at school, and then they come back and they have this thing that was in their head.
The laser cutter is my favorite tool though for making stuff for my 4-year-old, because you know, corrugated cardboard's cheap. There's always tension in my head between, I can laser cut this now, I can like instantly make this thing happen, whatever you've got in your head, but I also want you to be able to make stuff yourself, and you need to understand that like the first way you do anything really is by hand. So like draw it by hand, cut it out by hand, all that stuff. Do you find the same thing where you're like, I would love to be able to just like quickly make this thing happen, but we need to just sit down and, you know, do this together?
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, my workshop's quite small here, so it's 3.8 meters by 3.8 meters. And the one thing that I don't have is a laser cutter. I often go and use Collins. So I made a box up there for one of the things on my channel, and that was laser cut. And quite often, sometimes if we're making something and we're like, this needs to be precise, and we have a bit of lead time with it, then we will draw something out and we'll go get it laser cut. Or, you know, there are options with that. We got when we made the giant dinosaur, we decided to slice it and then cut it out of foam and then put it back together as the world's most complicated jigsaw, and then resin over it. And so things like that are great because you can take that, you then kind of have a rough idea of how it might go back together. You know, you can, because it was CNC'd, had all the numbers on it as well, which that's very helpful. And sometimes for ease, you think, oh yeah, it's so much easier to just draw this thing and get it laser cut while I'm doing something else. It's not. Or even in the case of like we built a giant toothbrush, and that was all made out of metal, and it was at a point where I didn't have my workshop, so I built it at Collins. And for that, I used a lot of the plasma cutter, the CNC plasma cutter, so drawing parts in Fusion and doing all of those calculations, and then plasma cutting them to then either roll them or weld them together. And in that situation, that's really great. But there are certain things where you just think, let's just get a hacksaw. Or, you know, there are certain points where we're trying to do some finishing stuff and I'm like, oh, stencil would be great, but we're just going to cut it by hand. So yeah, and I'm aware as well, like when it comes to my little boy, there's a fine line, because I'm aware that if I do everything for him and he isn't able to actually use kind of his own fine motor skills, he'll never actually be good at it. So things like we've got some really cool tools that you can cut up cardboard and kind of you can use to make holes and cut and score stuff, and they're really helpful. But yeah, I think there's something beautiful when a kid takes a cardboard box and they're like, oh, it's this thing. And as someone who makes stuff, you're like, oh, I could make that better. And you have to kind of like take a step back and be like, it's their thing, they're really happy with it. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to improve it all. If they ask later on, then maybe, you know.
This is shop talk, so we got to talk about your shop. So
Mm,
it's, you've got,
the
you mentioned it
chaos.
before. Yeah, it's the, the creative chaos back there, but it does seem to be organized. I see there's a lot
Okay,
of
this
clarity
is the
to it.
messiest. This is literally the messiest it is. Usually, I am obsessively tidy with it. Everything has a place, and because we build in here and we have to build a film, it's quite a small space. You kind of need to have that. I was the other day building Scribblebot robots. I don't know if you like robots that, yeah, for a workshop, and that's why it's chaos, because I was also building celebration cannons, and we were doing chocolate welding in here, and it was, yeah. So usually it's very tidy, and I would say for a small space it packs a punch.
Yeah. And you've got some stuff on display back there. Is there anything you want to tell us about? You mentioned the snowball uh cannon part there with the unicorn head, but there's got to be some other stuff we should talk about.
Yeah, one of the things that I've got that is still in the workshop, we need to use. So a lot of the things people always ask us, like, where does the inventions go? And we do have a storage container where a lot of things, the bigger things, live. But some things are in my workshop and some things are in the workshop in Cornwall. I currently have a vegetable launcher, which is just here. Let me grab it. Yeah, so this is a lovely vegetable launcher that you can fire your fruit and veg out of. So you get your 5 a day. This is probably actually Luna. So Sean's dog Luna often appears in builds and things. This is probably Luna's favorite invention. It has a very satisfying, like, fit hole where you can see if you've loaded it correctly. But she soon realized that we were firing apples and things out of this and absolutely adores it. So yeah, whenever she sees this, she's like, but yeah, so I've got the vegetable launcher here. I've got some bits at the top. So I've got an anti-swear box that I made on my channel. We've got a periscope hat, which was one I actually made when I had COVID, so I couldn't go anywhere near anyone, so I made that. We've got a foam firing spy camera. We've got a tea train, so a train that delivers a cup of tea. We've got a plunger up there, which was from a human egg drop. Obviously the bit of the snow cannon. And then we've got the bucket from the karaoke mop and bucket that we've done. I'm trying to think what else I have in here. I have the sign from Operation that James Bruton very kindly did to work out how much we had killed the dummy as well. But yeah, so it's kind of chaotic in here. I do have a box of a few other smaller ones, but yeah, I like to have all the colorful stuff on display as well if we can. So we have things like the popcorn from the popcorn doorbell down in Cornwall and things like that. So yeah, a bit of a mix.
It's a tricky thing, having a space that's functional that you can actually make stuff in, but it also has to be visually interesting and, a good place to shoot in. So
Everything gets very dusty.
yeah.
And I built this purposefully to film and build in. So I made some interesting decisions. Like, we don't have windows in here, which means you can film at any time and it doesn't have any outside light. There are lots of different lights that are on different circuits to get the lighting right. There's like overhead panels. Yeah, everything gets very dusty. So quite often I'm probably the only person who goes around their shop and, like, dusting all the stuff on the shelves and things. Yeah, quite often I get a lot of comments on social media of like, but it's a shop, you're making mess. And I'm like, yes, but we have to be able to film in it. And there's always a real mix of stuff in here. And if for example I'm doing a really long 3D print, like, that has to come in here because those things are noisy. And if they're running for, like, I did a print recently, it was like 5 days, and so that had to come in here. And I'm like, I was meticulously getting up all like the metal dust and all the stuff because I'm like, you would never have a 3D printer in a workshop like this. So yeah, I think one of the reasons that I'm able to do so many things in here, I've got like a little, I've got a little metal lathe here. Behind me in the corner I've got like welders and things like that. And the only way that I can do kind of all these different things is by trying to keep it vaguely clean and tidy.
Yeah. So let's talk about Maker's Secret Santa. So first, tell us what it is, how it works, and then what are some of your favorite projects from that? I've got a few of my own.
So, Maker Secret Santa was an idea that came to me in about 2019. So the maker community is amazing. If you go to maker events, and I think particularly there is a small group of people who make slightly ridiculous content online, and um everyone is very helpful. Some of us even have like a WhatsApp group where it's like, will I die doing this, or is it illegal? Where you can like ask all those really useful questions, because if you're making slightly crazy things, you never quite know. And collaborating takes a lot of time. So we've done a few collabs on our channel. We've done some stuff with Colin, which involved us pretty much the three of us living together for about 3 weeks to make that thing, because Colin takes a long time building things. To James Bruton, he came, we were like in the workshop together for like a week. And when you're building stuff, you have that time element. And for ages, I was trying to work out, how can we do collab where we're all able to showcase what we do, but also celebrate other people. And the whole like Secret Santa idea of, making something for someone else and receiving a gift from someone felt like it could maybe work. And so back in 2019, I was thinking about this idea, and I was at Maker Central, and there was me and Stephanie and Alan and Sean and Colin. And I just kind of said, I've got this crazy idea. What do people think of it? And people were up for it. And then, yeah, we just kind of kept it in quite a small circle the first year. So I can't remember if there was 8 or 9 of us. And we thought we'd give it a go, because we already knew, we had people spread across America, the UK, Canada, all over the place. And so, yeah, I wasn't quite sure if it was going to necessarily work. But then the first year happened and people seemed to like it. And then, yeah, it's kind of continued. And some people are still there from the beginning. Other people have kind of drifted in and out, kind of depending what they're doing. We trying to introduce like a few new makers that might come in for a year or whatever. But the idea being, we're trying to, maybe you follow a maker and, you might also like this other person's content. And so it's trying to highlight that as well. And yeah, there's some really talented people, and every year it amazes me with what people can make, because there's a budget. So, it's like £75 to £100 roughly. You have to be able to ship it, which obviously has its limitations at points. And then you have to make it in time to send it to someone else. And the whole circle has to work. And then obviously the videos are all released on the same day, and people can go around and see and hopefully discover new makers.
Yeah, it's the community aspect of it is so cool. I mean, you really get to see how much you all appreciate each other, and you're inspired by each other. And you maybe don't see it so much in individual videos from different creators that are in this world, but it's such a cool idea, Ruth. I mean, you've got this whole goodwill toward man, right? Like the sort of, you know what I mean? Like that whole side of it, I think is just I don't know, it's just super fun. It's very heartwarming, the whole thing, as in addition to being interesting. I think my favorite one is Becky Stern's hot dog machine. Um, it's just like so it's personal to her because she's a New Yorker, right? And it's, in the Sabrett hot dog stand is just such an iconic New York thing. But then you also get to see, her expertise come out through it, and you get to see all the cool stuff she knows how to do. And then, she's giving it to Colin Furs, so it's got to be some kind of machine, right? And it's like this whole package. It's such a cool idea. I'm glad to see it's taken off.
Yeah, and I think I love that, because so there comes a point, like, usually when everything's sent and there's usually some sort of panic, and Becky was like, oh, he's gonna need hot dogs, like, I can't ship him hot dogs. And so, like, yeah, there's always this thing of like either a secretive like message goes, hi, when you open your present you're gonna need X, or in the past, like I've frantically been running around like trying to like, okay, this so-and-so needs this, we need to be able to have that to make that work. So yeah, it's and it's always so nice to see like what people like what they build, but then also like how much thought goes into it for other people, because it's not just, you know, if someone wanted to build something that showcased their skills, but it's not always that. It's like, you know, this old Tony spending ages making some screwdrivers because he's realized that he doesn't have that. He's watched so many of his videos. Do you know what I mean? And everyone's kind of friends, and we quite often like meet at events and things like that. So we all kind of know each other. And so it's always really interesting to kind of see which bits of people's like either personalities or skills or the things that they love doing have kind of been captured within that build.
So usually we talk about the zombie apocalypse as kind of a fun question, but because it's Christmas, I thought we'd change it up and ask you what you would do to improve Santa's sleigh.
So we ran a challenge around this. So I've seen a lot of kids' ideas around this, and there was some that we would have loved to have done, but it didn't quite like I'd love to make a flying Santa sleigh, but I don't think it would hold many presents. We actually built a sleigh that fires presents. So it was in COVID, and obviously social distancing, Santa could fire presents. But yeah, I'd like it to fly. I feel like it's kind of maybe lacking fire. I feel like Santa's sleigh with fire would be better. Also, I'm like, they're missing a trick here, aren't they? Because, you know, you think of Christmas and there's like sweets and candy and things. Like, wouldn't it be great if Santa's sleigh was either like powered by, I don't know, powered by candy canes or like fired out jelly beans or something?
Well, I mean, you could do the Back to the Future Santa Claus thing, right? The Back to the Future sleigh, where you have the Mr. Fusion that you put candy in and it runs the machine, and then the time travel aspect solves the problem of bringing, you know, presents to billions of children.
Yeah, I'm sure Netflix is going to be in touch for their next Netflix film.
It's probably already out there. I'm sure someone's already done this. So thanks for talking to us, Ruth. This has been really inspiring. Your channel brings a lot of joy to a lot of people. It's super interesting. And just thanks for doing all the great work you're doing. Merry Christmas to you. Happy holidays to everybody out there. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, and happy holidays, everyone.
Hey everyone, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all things Shop Talk. If you're ready to try Fusion 360 for yourself, find the link in our description.